Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farron, co-owner of the company Horns of Odin, and I'm joined, as always, by Dr. Mathias Nordvig.
Hello, everyone. Now, this time we have a very special guest. We have Sól Geirsdóttir from the band Våluspá, Norwegian sort of like not reenacting, reincarnating band. Isn't that what what the description is here?
Oh yeah, that's what my Instagram says, at least.
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to join you guys.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've had your music on all afternoon in the workshop whilst I've been working away, and I took the time to send you a message because you have a particularly beautiful voice. It seems very effortless in its flow. Sometimes I think it can seem forced with other people, where you seem very much, I guess it's like a natural voice.
Wow, that's a grand compliment. That's a way of describing voices that I particularly enjoy myself. So I really appreciate it. I've been singing my whole life, so yeah.
Okay. Have you always done this style of singing, or did you used to do more, I guess, quote unquote, normal music?
Yeah, well, I love all sorts of music, really. But I started with classically training. So I took lessons from an opera singer, a man actually. And from then on, I went to a folk high school called Voss Folk High School. It's a Norwegian thing. I don't know if you guys have it in Britain, but it's like a year off, kind of, or a year to indulge in music. So there I learned the art of kveding, which is a traditional way of singing from Old Norse culture, or Old Norwegian culture, I should rather say, because we don't know what Viking music really sounded like.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I've also spent a lot of years just training myself in rhythmical singing. I know that I sounded like a goat for many years because in my parents' house, we had a lady who rented the downstairs apartment, and she came up several times and she was like, "Is someone dying in your house? Are you guys okay? Should I call the police?" And that was me trying to sing. So I guess I have improved based on your feedback.
I should hope so. I think she might need to clean her ears. I feel like that's the most offensive thing you could ever say to somebody who is singing as well.
Yeah, but I didn't give horse shit about it. I just kept on going because I knew from reading up on how to train your voice that you're gonna sound like a dead goat trying to force itself up from the grave again for a couple of years, and then you will get to where you want to be.
I feel like
I'm loving that image. The dead goat trying to force itself up to the grave.
I'm feeling that little glimmer of hope that maybe I could be a singer one day.
Oh yeah, you can. I mean, everybody can learn how to sing. It's all about technique.
I don't know about that. You've heard my talking voice. Imagine what my singing voice is like.
I find that many people can have very different voices when they sing as to speak. I don't know what you think about my voice when I speak. Does it sound like me singing?
No, I wouldn't say it sounds like you singing, but I wouldn't say you have quite as harsh voice as say I would.
Well, harsh can be good. Remember that.
I guess. So did you notice much in the way of the classical training helping out with what you do now, going into kind of like more, I guess like you say, more folk or Norwegian, kind of old Norwegian music?
Well, definitely. I mean, classical music is all about rules, really. And you learn how to place your voice in terms of purity, I guess you could call it, like hitting the right note. But learning what I learned in classical training, I also learned how to break the rules. And that's kind of what I'm doing now, because I like the artistic freedom of being more in tune with your natural vibes, so to speak, when you sing a traditional way. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but yeah, it makes sense to me.
No, I think it does. Does it make sense to you, Matthias?
Look, man, I can hardly keep like a beat. Like I am so not musical at all for some weird reason. I don't know why. I guess again it might come down to training, but I feel like I understand what you're saying.
Okay, well, I like to talk in images, so I might pull something out of my arse and
Go for it. No, I like to like explain things in images as well, and like so no, I get that. I very much appreciate that.
Well, yeah, it's a clear difference between classical music and kväding, because when you sing classical music, you kind of place the tone in your head, like coming through your third eye, so to speak, and when you perform the art of kväding, you kind of use chest voice, so you place the tonality from here.
Okay,
so that's the difference. And also in classical music, you use a lot of vibrato, and you don't necessarily do that in kväding, or you shouldn't. But you know, artistic freedom and me, that kind of goes hand in hand.
Of course, I think there's no hard and fast rule to anything like this. It's all about expression.
I think so too.
Like I said, one thing I did notice, I would have said that your music definitely has like a folk feel to it, I guess. Almost kind of reminded me a little bit of Fawn as well, with that very kind of folky style, which I really enjoyed. Is that something you intended or just happened naturally? I know you've mentioned you used like a folk school, you trained at.
Well, yeah, some of the songs are actually old folk songs from medieval times that we kind of just arranged ourselves. But yeah, it's definitely something that I just keep in the back of my mind at all times whenever I write music, because I get a lot of inspiration from the old ways of doing it. Even as when it comes to just writing the lyrics, that it rhymes with letters and not necessarily by words. So it's kind of embedded in me and I can't seem to escape it. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. So I know you said, obviously we don't know what like the music would sound like in the Viking Age. So how do you go about trying to recreate that, or at least get as close to as what your interpretation of it would be? And also, I guess, what do we know of what music would have sounded like back then? I guess maybe we know instruments to a degree. Yeah,
we do know some instruments to a degree. So what do I do to make it kind of, we mix a lot of different instruments because we use electrical instruments as well as wide selection of folk instruments.
Yeah.
Behind me, for those of you listening and who can't see me. So it's kind of a mashup between the old ways and modern times, and that's what I'm all about as a person as well. And I think that's how you make a culture not only survive but thrive and find its new form. How you get more people to be interested in it. So for me, it's not about being as close to what Viking music might have sounded like. It's more about taking elements from what we know, like using a kraviklyre, which is not exactly dated in the Viking Age, but pretty as close as we get. And then adding layers of just modern things on top of that. And as well, I take a lot of inspiration when it comes to the lyrics from the Eddas and from what's written and what we know. So yeah, I don't know if I just talked myself away here. I tend to do that sometimes. So if I do that, just pull me back in.
I think it makes perfect sense. We don't have that much knowledge of like exactly how what music was, how music was used, and what it sounded like in say like the Viking Age. We get a little more information through the written material from the medieval period. I think the oldest actual song that we can identify as a song that's written down is from the Codex Runicus from Scania, so the Danish area. It's that little ditty, Drømte mig en drøm, which like the Danish national TV has been using as their jingle for like the decades. So like, and that's from 1300. So that's like the earliest like actual song, right? Then we can talk about like what was it like singing the Eddic poetry, for instance, and that's, you know, what we see some musicians are working with in different ways and figuring out, and also proving that it is quite easy actually to sing it once you've learned the poetry. So I mean, I would say that the Eddic poetry is another example of like possible music that actually existed in one form or another. Question is like what kinds of instruments and so on, and that always comes down to, you know, some cranky archaeologists saying, well, we haven't found anything. They're like, yeah, sure, guys, but they must have had like, as we were talking with Heilung about, right, that they must have had drums. Like they must have had drums. There's no culture on this planet that didn't have drums. You just haven't found any.
So Matthias, I guess I've never really got my head around this. Do we just have like nothing from the Viking Age to suggest that they played music? I guess I've always just been of their mind of like, of course they would have done that. I just assumed they had like loads of instruments and.
Well, the problem is that we don't find anything in the in like archaeological remains. I think there's one instance of a lyre or something like that. I can't even remember. Maybe a flute. Like, and that's it, right?
I just naively assumed that we just had shitloads.
No, we don't.
There was just loads, and it was just common knowledge that they just would have played a bunch of different music, and that's just. I think
it's the same with shields. Like it's the same with shields. We don't have that many shields, or I think we've only found one actual shield. What we really usually find is just a band, usually made of metal, that holds the shield together, because everything else has disappeared and it hasn't been preserved that well. And that's the same, like instruments, they're, you know, intricate designs. It's not, you know, a big piece of wood, for instance, that can persist for a very long time in the ground. So they simply disappear quicker, right? And that's one of the issues. But of course, I mean, there are different ways you can approach history as well. The theoretical position that says, "Oh, we don't know anything about instruments," is like the positivist approach to history. That would basically say, well, you can only say something about that time period if like you have proper sources that can authenticate that particular thing existed in that time period, right? There are other ways that we can approach this as well, and we can say, for instance, look, you can see that 100 years later we are finding these instruments, or we have evidence of this and that type of singing or something like that. So there's a chance that this could have existed back then as well. So there's like different ways that you can approach this, but obviously, I mean, singing, drumming, string instruments are such a like old elements of European culture in general that it would be weird if that particular corner of Europe didn't have it, where everybody else did, right?
There's something called "nothing is new under the sun."
Mm-hmm.
Is that an English saying, or is it just...
No, yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that's one of the things with me. I believe that everything moves in circles, and I think that people will be people, you know, and we've always liked the joys of life. So it would be really strange, as you say, Matthias, if they didn't use drums or their voices, or maybe some bone flutes made of their enemies' bones, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the simplest thing in the world to just sing, or even just to tap on something. Like you got a drum, might not be the best, but it seems like a very natural thing to do. You know, I can't. I'm a self-professed not very good at singing, but when I'm alone, or sometimes when I'm working in the workshop with Eddie, then he has to put up with me singing because it just naturally happens.
There you go. that should be like the force behind music, is the pure joy of it. And that takes us back to me saying before that everybody can learn to sing.
He doesn't enjoy listening to me sing. he just looks at me a bit funny every now and then.
Oh my. Maybe you should move to throat singing then, just scare him off.
Maybe, yeah. No, but I think it is just such a natural thing that it seems silly to assume that it wouldn't have happened. Matthias, what I want to ask you is, do you find it in like the saga literature or at least maybe not like a song, or at least reference to music, or because I guess we have like parties, I guess, so you would assume that there is some.
Yeah, I feel like there's got to be some references to singing in the saga literature, of course,
or even like dancing, because you would assume that you wouldn't dance without.
Yeah. Isn't there something from Lindisfarne? The poor monks, when the Vikings came rowing in, they were throat singing and they got shit scared and started running. Is that true, or is it a myth?
I haven't heard that story. I definitely haven't read it anywhere. So maybe it's like a wandering story from somewhere.
It might be.
Well, welcome to my life. Just bringing stuff up on here and just getting shut down.
Sorry, guys.
No, that's what you're here for.
Well, so I mean, the saga literature is so like masculine and about like the interactions between like these warrior men, right? So a lot of the focus when it comes to these kinds of leisure, I guess you could call it, right? A lot of the focus is usually on the skaldic poetry, and like somebody recited a skaldic poem, or there was somebody told this story, and so on. That's really what they focus on.
But would a skaldic poem not be sang? Would it just be? Would we assume it's just recited as?
But this is the problem that we have from sort of like the scholarly tradition of the 20th century, and it's really the 20th century more than anything else. So before the 20th century, scholars of many things used to be capable of different things, not just one thing, right? But in the 20th century, like you get so specialized in scholarship that gradually we just become like those who like squiggly nerds sitting at a desk, right? And that is actually, you could argue, in my opinion at least, that that's a cultural loss, because that means that there's a whole sort of like frame of reference that you don't necessarily have, right? Like imagine a scholar who is researching Viking ships and boat building and so on, who's never been on a Viking ship, right? Who's never tried building at least part of a Viking ship. Those people do exist. So that's a problem, right? And in that sense, what we're seeing in the 20th century, and when it comes to poetry, is that the cultural conceptions of what poetry is in the 20th century has an influence on how scholars think about poetry in the saga literature in pre-Christian times and so on, just like with anything else. And that definitely sort of like takes an element out of it, and especially like the imagination to think, oh wait, maybe there was some kind of like drum beat or music that came along with this, right? And that's sort of like, thankfully, what has been happening through the last like 30 years now, especially in Scandinavia, is that scholarship and experimental archaeology in different ways have been coming together and like figuring out more and more stuff. And that's actually made, I think, everybody a lot smarter. Mm-hmm. And I really hope that I don't have any colleagues out there nowadays who would say that there's no chance that music was involved with skaldic recitation. I mean, again, I'm not a musical genius of any kind, so I don't know how it would happen. but I'm pretty sure that it did. Right?
Well, imagine the Viking Age being a whole musical. That would be fun.
Yes.
It would be so fabulous.
Yeah, fabulous. I love that word. I just got to thinking about cider and galdring. Have you guys heard about galdring?
Mm-hmm.
Not a form of singing, because you kind of need to make your voice bare in a long distance. Wouldn't be a way of singing to the gods.
Mm-hmm.
What is gold? I don't want to try to pronounce it. Galdring.
Galdring. It's a way of performing magic with your voice, really, because you're calling out to the gods, as I've understood it. And when I sing, at least, I keep that in the back of my mind as well. So as far as I've understood, galdring sounds a lot like when you're singing rhythmically. It's a technique called belting that many rock singers use. You can sing without a microphone in that way, really. So yeah, maybe that could be some sort of evidence for the voice being used in a musical way, in a ritualistic way as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the term galdra is widely used in the literature as a reference to some kind of like song magic. Whatever that actually sounded like is hard to really say, but you can look at poems like Halvamál, the Sayings of the High One, as an example where there's portions of that poem that definitely look like they would have been classified as galdra. Of course, what happens in the 1500s is that the term galdra becomes conflated with sort of like a broad description of like witchcraft. So there's there are some terminological issues here and there where we're not entirely sure exactly if it always pertains to like song magic alone. But the word itself, at least in its etymology, has to do with singing and making sound in general. And we also have, at least in modern Danish, we have the word gale, which is like to like sort of like just make some crazy noise.
Yeah. The Norwegian word would be gaule.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so these words still exist in different ways and have similar connotations, I think. I think that's definitely an evidence of like some kind of singing magic that was widespread. We also have, Adam of Bremen, when he describes the temple in Uppsala, he's writing in 1070. And that's when, presumably, that temple is still in existence. He's never been there himself. He's just gotten all his information from Svein Austurðarson, the Danish king, that he visited for about 10 years before. And he's telling us that in the temple, they were singing these songs in honor of Freyr. But they're so lewd that he doesn't want to reproduce them. So,
I love that.
Right.
That's brilliant.
That's great.
Well, he's also sitting there. He's like, yeah, and Freya has a giant penis. Like that's also how he describes them.
Just cider and galdring in general, or at least cider, has a lot of sexual elements as well that I think scared the Christians because Christianity it has a lot to do with shame, and I don't think that was as prominent.
Prudish.
In Norse culture. Yeah, prudish, boring.
That's it, yeah.
Taking the fun out of it.
Yeah, I can imagine that the pre-Christian cultures weren't embarrassed by sex, especially in the way that we are in modern times as well. I think that it's become very much a shameful thing that should be behind closed doors, and especially even with like nudity, whereas it probably wasn't the same then. It was just something you spoke about openly and
when
songs about
worshipping like gods and goddesses like Frey and Freya, well, obviously you don't have a big issue with it. I would think, at least. This is just my intuition talking here. And they also had a lot of phallic symbols that they worshipped or just gathered around in the guild hall and danced around. I don't know. I'm just imagining.
Some of them are still out there. You know, in the Norwegian and Swedish countryside, you can find phallic rocks, like they're carved as giant penises that are standing around.
Yeah. And in a modern context, you have the Pride Parade. There's lots of phallic symbols going about there. So people will be people.
Yeah.
A penis is always funny, no matter what, and no matter what age. It's if you leave a man alone long enough, whether it's a piece of wood, a stone, a pen and pencil, a dick is getting made or drawn. That's just one of the certainties of life.
So now you're really actually telling us what you do when you're like carving horns, like you're standing there.
Sometimes you might think I'm making notes on the podcast, but I'm just drawing little penises. It's just what happens. It's just one of those things, I guess.
People were just they've been making jokes about these things ever since the Viking Age. I believe that a lot of the rune stones, or not the rune stones, but the rune what's it called?
Rune sticks.
Yes, thank you. The rune sticks, they're kind of pervy, aren't they?
Oh yeah. No, there are several, very lewd inscriptions. Like that.
We should do an episode. We should do an episode just going through the rune sticks.
Yeah, we should.
just reading. I think that would be good fun. I think like a lot of the time as well, like phallic symbols is to do with coming of like manhood as well. Because I know when I did the stone lifting in Scotland, there was one that was penis shaped. I mean, it wasn't. They said it did. Personally, I didn't really.
Did you lift a giant dick?
Apparently so. Yeah, just 130 kilo dick. But it didn't look like one when I got there. But apparently, in the description of it, it was meant to, and it was this traditional stone that it was lifted by the clans of a coming of age for the young men. So that's also, I guess, a symbol of that.
Yeah, right. Passage, maybe.
Well, that's it. Yeah, somebody had to make the coming of age joke. I heard in the chat. I was like, I heard it when I said it, but I didn't want to make to bring it up. But there we go. A good choice of words, I guess.
Oh my God!
How did we get to this, guys? What happened?
I don't know what's happened.
About Freya. I'll help you here. We were talking about Freya and Frey. That's how we got into this. Yeah.
Well, and that's where those gods will take us. That is the case. So dicks aside, Dan, you were going to say something.
Oh, was that?
I think you were starting a sentence.
I was just sitting here blushing. No, let's talk about rituals. Let's move away from the penises.
There's plenty of penises in rituals too. I mean,
yeah, I was going to say that you're not going to escape. Okay. But speaking of which, I mean, I believe that the goddess Freya has been kind of dumbed down when the tales have been told on. And I think that has something to do with the Christianization of Norway. I don't really care for, but I think everybody knows that. But she's often described as just this bimbo in some kind of way, just beautiful and it's goddess of fertility. Woo! But there's so much more to Freya. There's so many dimensions to her. She picks half of the warriors when they fall, and Odin picks the other half. So she's also the goddess of war and death. And I also believe, this is controversial, by the way, but I believe that she is actually the same goddess as Frigg, who's known for being Odin's wife. Because you have a lot of literature describing Frigg as being married to, Freya being married to someone called Od, I believe. And that's not too far from Odin, is it? And he has like a lot of names, many, over 100 names. And I think Freya might have had many names as well. And there's a book about this topic too. that I recommend it, please?
Of course.
Okay, it's called Freyja, den store gudinnen i Norden. Also, it's about Freya and the great goddess of the north, and it's written by a woman called Britt-Mari Näsström. I have it here. I can show it to the camera.
Yes.
Book, you know it.
Yes. Britt-Mari, she's quite a heavyweight in the study of old Nordic religion. So yeah, I'm very well familiar with it.
Okay, good. Well, I've just always thought this to myself, because I had this kind of intuitive way about going about my personal pursuit for being more rooted with my cultural heritage. And sometimes it just gets really overwhelming for me whenever I read the Eddas or whatever it might be, and I just find something that resonates with what I've kind of always known within myself. I get chills and it's too much for me. I have to put the book down and go for a walk just to ground myself, because it kind of reminds me of past lives, really. So I just have to take a break from that and remind myself that I'm living in this time and age. And, it just gets intense sometimes.
So, Matthias, I've got to ask you what you think about the idea that they're one and the same.
So this is a old theory. I think it goes all the way back to Jakob Grimm, back in 1835-ish, when he's writing what in English is called Teutonic mythology, right? Deutsche Mythologie. He proposes this, and there are some important elements to the crossovers, right? As you Sól, as you mentioned, we have this mention several places that Freya was married to this person named Odr, and he went on these travels, and then she wept because he left, and then she followed him along, and that's how she got all these different names, because she was going to different places and taking on different names. And Odr as the name itself is the same stem as the root in Odin, presumably, at least. And so basically what we're dealing with is probably the same character. That would be sort of the key element that informs us that they are the same figure in the mythology. Now you can dig into the etymology of the names Frigg and Freyja, and then start discussing what is do they actually originate in the same stem, or are they how are they related in different ways? Freya means lady in old Norse, sort of lady of distinction. We're told this by Snorri. He says the word frúr comes from that, and that's modern Scandinavian frúa. So that's an honorable lady, I guess, is the best translation for that word. The root of both these names, as far as I remember, and haven't looked it up for a while, but that is a word, a Proto-Germanic word that also has produced the word free, right, and relates to being loved. So there is something to be said for that theory, and it's not impossible. So you of course have to ask yourself, why are these characters then split in Nordic mythology? What happens? Why do we have a Frigg over here and a Freya over there? Freya definitely has a lot more descriptions and plays a bigger role actually in Nordic mythology in the texts that we have available than Frigg does. There's neither of them actually play particularly big roles, unfortunately. We don't have good stories where Freya is the protagonist or something like that. We have Frigg. She is most active in the story about Baldur's death, That's where we see her doing things. And then there's also the preamble, prose preamble to the poem Patron, where Frigg has this like back and forth with Odin, like Odin is like, I want to go test this giant's knowledge, and she's like, oh no, don't go, he's dangerous. And then he's like, I'm gonna do it anyway, and then she's like, okay, bye. And then we have also the situation in Grimnismal, the prose preamble there, where we have like Frigg and Odin. They are basically battling each other through these two princes, right? They're racing them to and then sending them out into the world after that. So there's something. So that's really her roles, right? And then we have Freya. She's well described in the mythology in Snorri. He gives us a good amount of details. She's only really active though in a few stories. She's in Thrymskvida, the story where Thor's hammer is stolen by the giant Thrymr. Thrymr wants Freya in marriage in return for giving back the hammer. That's not happening. That's why Thor has to go dressed as Freya instead. Then, and that's an interesting thing, because that's really the role that she often plays in the mythology. We see that in other stories as well, that the giants or a giant wants Freya as sort of like an object that he can take with him. Like so, Hrungnir, for instance, has invaded Ausgarður, and he's like getting drunk. And he then, once he gets really drunk, he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to like bury this place under the ground. I'm going to like take Sif and Freya with me, and like all those kinds of things, right? And that's when Thor then shows up and it's like, no, I'm going to kick your ass. So there are those elements there, which is quite interesting too, because what this means is that Freya then plays that role of being sort of a deity that, or a figure that must be protected from being taken by the Jötnar, just like the sun and the moon as well, you know, and like these precious items that the gods are in control over. And then you have the other side of Freya as well, where she is accused of witchcraft and promiscuity, like Hjalti Skeggjason, according to Íslendinga book, the Book of Icelanders. He says, he was outlawed for having called Freya a bitch in Iceland, so back in pagan times. So that's interesting, because there you have a Christian. He was presumably Christian, who sort of like defamed her, in just like we see in you know, in the Mediterranean area with deities like Aphrodite, Venus, Diana, and so on.
Wondered why men in general, like, now I'm speaking more widely, are so threatened by females' sexuality. Like we can show a man's nipple on Instagram, but you can't show a woman's nipple. Like if we photoshopped Varg's nipple onto my breast, I could put that image out.
I never even thought of it like that.
Well, that's reality for you now. And I think, I'm sorry that I interrupted you, but is there a way that there might have been some rewritings of Freya due to the Christian view of her, like the Madonna complex in some way? Maybe that's also a reason why they split Freya into both Frigg and Freya. So you have like this housely wife-like figure of Frigg, and then you have Freya, like the slut, so to speak.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. That's definitely happening in the material. You're seeing this very Christian perspective on it, where there's also that story of how she like sleeps with like 4 dwarfs so that she can get Brísingamein, the golden necklace that she wants, right? And it's there's similar types of stories elsewhere in other contexts, like in Saxo's History of the Danes. You see similar stories. They're obviously based off of the same complex like of tales that surround Freya. We have the story of Gevion as well, who plows that piece of land out of Sweden that then becomes Zealand in Denmark. She's called a witch. She tricks Gylvi. She's like this traveling witch, and that's really it. There's this.
But my witch is a compliment.
Well, yeah, and that's really the interesting thing, right? There's a very distinct Christian perspective on it that is like seeped into the material, and is then sort of like painting these female deities in a certain light whenever they're mentioned. Sorry, what?
Yeah, just demonizing them or just undermining their importantness by using their sexuality, and I think it's just dumb.
Very much agree.
I agree.
Some better words.
but like you said, some things never change, and you still get that.
That's just it. What was it really like in the Viking Age? And that's what's so interesting. We really don't know, because the Christians burned our buildings, and just offering sites were just plowed down, and they put churches there instead. And the wooden figures were probably burned too.
Absolutely, no, that definitely happened. We have archaeological evidence of such things happening to several what is like typically called central sites in archaeology, not temples, because archaeologists want to be a little careful with that word sometimes. But yeah, it's very obvious, like Uppåkra in what is now southern Sweden in Skåne, just south of Lund. The old cathedral town, right? It started out by being basically the archbishopric of all of Scandinavia for a brief period. Then we see other archbishoprics, but just south of there was a huge temple that was burnt around, like in the first half of the year, in the first half of the thousands approximately. So that's a good example of like decidedly, getting rid of that pre-Christian past in different ways.
Matthias, before we get too far away from Freya and Frigga, I wanted to ask: do we ever get them in the same room? Because I feel like that's a way to tell whether they are the same person or not. Like, do we ever get them in a story together where both of them are described in the same place at the same time? Or is it always like one or the other?
Frigga and Freya?
Yeah.
I've
cracked it.
There is a Lokasenna, right? Loki's quarrel, where Loki has kicked the door into the party, and then he just starts like going nuts and talking shit about everybody. Frigga and Freya are both present in the room, as far as I remember, but otherwise not so much. Like
that's why I was just wondering whether it was maybe a mistranslation or different tellings or like different names for the same person. But
so this is the interesting. This is the interesting thing. Sól, as you were also pointing out earlier, that like Odin has like all of these names, right? And if you start looking into those names, there are definitely some of them that do not fit Odin at all. And the same, like Freya has a bunch of names. Several gods actually have a bunch of names. Thor also has at least like 5 or 7. I can't remember exactly, but multiple names. And so what this tells me as a scholar of this material is that there's probably a situation where basically these figures of the mythology, they function as sort of like black holes that like draw things to them, right? So when it comes to like names and stories as well. So this is well known in the scholarship of like storytelling in general and memory, especially if we're talking about oral memory. You have a hero, and they gain sort of like what do you call it? They gain that's like the one that people keep telling stories about, and then slowly they attract other stories and also other names, and that is really what it looks like in Nordic mythology in general. Like Odin, because he, at the point where Snorri is writing down in the 1200s, like he is the known figure, and so Snorri is probably like, oh yeah, we'll just like attach this name to him as well, and that name, and so on. Or somebody before him could have also have done it, right?
Yeah,
So
this might sound like a silly idea, which isn't anything new for me, I guess. Do you think it's possible that maybe somebody was sat around the fire retelling one of these heroic stories and thought, I'm just going to put my own name in there because I want to sound really awesome. And then it just lives on with the story for people that tell it, and it spreads, and then here we go, there's another name attached to.
You know what? That is exactly how Snorri Sturluson tells us that people became pagan in Scandinavia in the first place. A bunch of dudes sitting around telling stories, and then they're like, well, I'm actually Odin.
I mean, there's no Google. People can't fact check it. So there's no reason why people. I bet everybody lied. I bet everybody was like, yeah, I went out and just killed a bear, or a wolf came along and took the body. Sorry. You could make this, you could make shit up. Like, oh yeah, I went on a walk. There was a dragon.
Oh yeah, yes. There's no myheritage.com or myvikingheritage.com.
That's it. No, exactly. So I feel like there must be so much. It must be so hard as a scholar to sift through the bullshit that has slipped through, because at the end of the day, we are talking about people who, especially, will have bragged for notoriety. People do it today. You know, it's no different than the Instagram of today of people taking pictures at certain angles to make it look good, or borrowing a watch to take a picture with it as a big flex to show how much money they have, but they don't. It's no different. It's just, it will have happened back then, you know. They will have borrowed something or shown off or lied about it, and then that could just easily trickle through, and somehow two idiots end up talking about it on a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that is definitely a possibility. It has definitely happened. Certainly. Like, yeah, we can't get around that. But of course, like, we have to at least assume that a core element of this literature is you know, valid pre-Christian material that people believed in. Are like, as scholars, the main thing that we worry about is like, how much did Snorri Sturluson fuck up? That's what we're always worried about.
Snorri. Why art thou Snorri? Oh, I think you made up a lot of things. We actually had a teacher. I remember when I was in, I don't remember the English word for it, but when I was a teenager, I had this really epic teacher, and she taught us a lot of stories from the Eddas, and I was the only one interested in it, because back then, you know, we didn't have Vikings. So you actually had to dig up stuff yourself to become interested. And she taught us about this, and she said, Snorri Sturluson, he was so full of shit. When they came for him, he was a scared man who just hid in the corner himself. So here he was telling all these great tales about these guys, but well, he just he hid away like a scarecrow. No, not scarecrow. What do you call it? Like a coward.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, that's the word.
No, he very much did. Him killed in his basement, trying to escape.
That's what my teacher said as well. So he wrote all this heroic stuff down, and one can only wonder, is that what he wanted for himself? But well, maybe he had some complexes. I don't know.
I mean, he was a really bad politician. That's one thing that we know. I mean, we're talking about a guy who like throughout his life just failed every bluff that he tried. Like, and like, I mean, his son got his balls cut off by his uncle, I think it was, or something like that. Like, yeah, no, it's not fucked up a lot.
I think that's a good point to remember, that a lot of the stuff, I think so many people take it as gospel, especially when you're just starting out in this world. It's super confusing. So it's really easy to go, okay, there's this book, there's the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, there's these two books, I'm going to read them, and that's true, it's factual, and kind of go down that avenue, because it is so much easier than just kind of been accepting that we don't know so much, and figuring out by the time you've read it, you probably know less than when you started.
The more you learn, the less you feel like you know.
Exactly. So I think it's fair to remember that not everything in these is 100% accurate. A lot of it is guesswork and figuring out, and we can lean one way based on what we know, but it doesn't mean that 100% that is exactly how it is. So you just kind of have to keep that in the back of your mind, I guess.
Oh yeah. When it just comes to the Old Norse religion, how to interpret that, for me, it's just been connecting with myself, and again, my intuition, and just the collective consciousness. That's actually a thing, by the way. And just trying to figure out how does it resonate with me, and how can I connect with the past, and how can I connect with the roots, and how to perform Seider today. It's nothing written down, not that I know, at least, about it. So I get a lot of questions frequently on my Instagram from people wanting to learn how to perform the art of Seider, or just how to do a ritual. And it's just kind of hard to guide people on that, because first and foremost, I keep very private about my own rituals. We have the rituals from the Viking Age, like blots that we know of, that they held in the Gilde halls, and it was kind of like a feast and an offering to the gods. Or you can have like utesitting, which is basically just sitting your ass down on a Viking grave and meditating. And we know that the Vølvas, the Volver, did it. So you have stuff like that everyone can do, and that's pretty easy to get into. But then again, how to work with your own energies, and how to perform maybe shamanism, that's not easy to just describe to people in a simple message on Instagram. It just feels wrong to me to do that.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Before we get down, let's try and kind of get some explanations. What is Seider? I'm horrible with that little Seider.
Yes.
Seider.
Yes. Well, it's kind of, I think it's a reciting of magical texts through song and dance, or it's the art of magic. We hear about it in the sagas. Freyja taught it to Odin. So she actually taught a lot of magic to Odin, taught him how to do it. So I guess there's many ways to do it, but it has a lot to do with just getting into the magic. Basically.
Okay. Matthias, what do we know about how much like quote unquote the Vikings or people in Scandinavia would have believed in magic? I guess because it's now like in modern times it sounds so weird, I guess, because it's so far removed now. So yeah, do we know whether they would have? Because I guess the one that comes to mind is you always see when people talk about runes, you get a lot of people saying, the runes weren't magic, they're just a writing source. So then you get that kind of separation. So I wondered what we know about.
So with the rune stuff, that's like scholars that really want to just like try to play down any like any tendency to think of runes as like agents of magic, because it's not even 10% of the runic inscriptions that have magic or ritual context. Most of them are just like writing, but that doesn't mean that the runes didn't have any context for magic. They definitely did. We have multiple Eddic poems, for instance, that mention runes in context of magic. The first thing that we need to realize here is that when it comes to the Viking Age, and also actually a lot of like medieval Christianity, there's not a big distinction between magic and religion. Like these two things come together. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing that we need to realize. We also need to realize that there's no basic difference between somebody in the 900s doing Seder to divine whether or not the famine is going to end, and a bunch of Christians gathering on a beach in Florida trying to pray away a hurricane, because that shit happens. just keep that in mind nowadays.
That's a very good point. Or even just the average person sitting down and praying, exactly. I guess you could argue is a form of magic, because
it is. Because the basic idea of magic is that through this action, I can manipulate the world around me in one way or another, right? So I can say a prayer, and that the idea is then that prayer is like heard by God, and then God changes something, right? Mm-hmm. That's magic. I don't know, like stand with one leg in an ancient grave and swing a dead cat over my head and drop blood from my under my tongue at the full moonlight, and like write some scribbles on a piece of paper, and that's also magic, because I think that has some effect on the world. That's how this works, right? That's how we as humans think, and all humans think like this. All humans have the capacity to think like this. Some allow themselves to do it, some don't allow themselves to do it. But it's the same as like the football fan who has to wear the same damn shirt every time.
I was just thinking that. Wins. Yeah. Like I don't believe in magic, but I've got lucky pants.
There and it's go. Like that's the same. You do believe in magic.
some scientific evidence. Just hear me out on this. From the psychology, when you use imagination or visualization, if you've been there in your mind, you can go there in your body. So whenever athletes run a race in their heads, they're activating the motor cortex in their brains. And when you do this, it's easier for you to kind of get there in the body later. There's a lot of studies on this. So you could go as far as to say that's some sort of magic, I guess.
Yeah, and see,
absolutely.
This is actually quite important, because we know psychologically and also in terms of like evolution that religion and magical thinking is a key component to our species' survival. Like this is like those rituals that the hunters did before they went hunting were part of exactly what you were explaining right there, Sól, to put yourself in that situation of actually catching the animal. So it makes a lot of sense, and it's not like silly or ridiculous or anything like that. It's actually like a very important function of our lives.
Well, visualization is extremely important. I know firsthand from things like jiu-jitsu, you can do it once, twice, and then there were times where we do a move, you drill a particular move, and then on a nighttime I would just think about it over and over and visualize doing it, and the next time you do it, it is easier. But I think we do that naturally when we're asleep as well. Anyway, when you go to sleep, you run through the day's events over and over and try kind of take it apart and put it back together and look at it in different ways, and usually you can see things I think that's why usually when you've got a problem and you fall asleep and you wake up in the morning, suddenly it seems clear. And it's not because you've just got smarter, it's because your brain's working on a nighttime, it's still figuring it out and trying to do the job.
Yeah, the brain is washing itself, so to speak. You need sleep. It's very important. And we have a lot of information about that in Våluspá as well. So basically it says that you just get dumber if you lose your sleep. You don't solve your problems by staying up all night rethinking it over and over again. Sometimes you just need to step away and look at the canvas from a distance, and then the painting becomes clear.
Yes, no, that's true. And yeah, so going to like the descriptions that we have of like Seder as a ritual in the literature, right? The prime text is Eric the Red's saga, where we have this scene in Greenland where there's been a famine for a while, and then this Völva called Thorbjörg comes to the town, or whatever you want to call it, the farmstead, and what we see there is like very like, specific description of her clothing. Like I think she's like wearing like gloves that are lined with cat skin.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a cat right here.
There you go.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
And like, what is it? A rabbit skin cap. Yeah, I can't remember which one it is. Like, but there's like it's very specific description of her clothing, and that type of clothing that she's wearing is also out of the ordinary. This is not normal type of dress, and the description is then that they make some kind of like elevated seating for her, a sort of like quote unquote throne. It's called, I believe, a Statler in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then she sits there, and then the women that are present are supposed to like sing this song called the Vardlokur. And it's uncertain what that word means, but it could mean something like a song that entices the spirits, the guardians, or something like that. And what she then does is that she goes into some kind of trance, presumably. That's not really described, but that's what we assume. And then she sees into the other world somehow. Maybe her spirit leaves her body. It's not well described what's happening right there, but something like that. And then she comes back with the answer that the famine is going to end. And we're told that she's treated with a lot of respect as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another important aspect of all of this. And we do have graves from the Viking Age that seem to suggest like a similar way of thinking. There's that famous one from Fyrkat in Denmark, from like I think it's from the 970s or 80s. I can't really remember exactly. And this woman was buried in quite fancy dress, like red and blue, which would be the most expensive colors. She had like a pouch with like all the funky witch things, like henbane and white lead and like a owl's vomits and eye of newt, like all of that stuff. Like I don't know if there was eye of newt in there, but those kinds of like
very Macbeth then.
Well, that's the thing. Like that, it is like there's like a mouse skeleton in there, as far as I remember, and so like these are special objects. These are objects that she would have used in her magical practice,
mm-hmm.
And she also has a rod, staff, and like we see several examples of those kinds of graves from the Viking Age, which of course suggests that these were women who had those powers. They were considered authorities and capable of doing these rituals.
Oh, yeah.
And then question is, what are the rituals themselves, right? This is what I just like referred is like the most the closest we get to an actual description of a ritual. We can go into like the etymology of the word seder. The suggestion is that it has something to do with strings. So that's where
just before we go down the route of the actual rituals, what's the possibility that it was just like for exploitation? Because when you're in a desperate situation, people believe in desperate things, and in the same way, in my personal opinion, you would get psychics today who there's some psychics who made a hell of a lot of money out of preying on people's emotions in certain times. And is it possible that could be a situation as to why you would have like witches because they're giving a solution to a problem that people are panicking about and struggling about? Or again, could it be like you say, it's like a spectrum. You have some maybe that were exploiting it, and some weren't. But I feel like the way you described it's almost like a rock star of the times. You know, you're getting
almost.
Yeah, you're getting showered with gifts. You're getting put on a raised platform. You are the center of attention, and that's got to be very enticing for anybody if you can just sit there and go, it's going to be all right.
I mean, I think we have to assume that there's the whole range, like from the charlatan to the very genuine person.
Mm-hmm.
The people who believe in this, like it's the same. Go on Instagram, follow hashtags like witch or something like that, or witchcraft, and then you will see all kinds of people who are using that hashtag. And very often lately, I have noticed that one of the people, the types that use that hashtag are prosperity blessing witches. So basically, what they do is like there's a meme that says like this and get tenfold back, or like this and get a bunch of money, and that kind of shit. And that's bullshit, right? That's just charlatans, right?
Bullshit, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree that there has to have been a dimension, you know,
Mm-hmm.
from charlatans, like you said, Mathias, and to the real deal. And we have a saying in Norwegian that is "jungeltromma går," and that means that the drum beats on, and that what it actually means when you try to translate it to English is that your reputation goes before you. Mm-hmm. So if you're good at what you do, people will recommend you onwards. And what these series used to do, the vulvas, or however you pronounce that word, is that they would go into a trance-like state, and they would do some foretellings about what was going to happen at that particular farm where they traveled to. And I would imagine that if these prophecies weren't fulfilled, no one would recommend that witch onwards. No,
that's a really good point. I think you're right about that. That you could definitely also like lose your magic, right? Your reputation was at stake as well. So if you did abuse your situation in one way or another, or your position, then absolutely, I think that would also be part of dethroning people in different ways.
And the Viking society was very much about honor and reputation. So, well, I would imagine that there were some pretty good witches back then who wouldn't do things for just likes on Instagram, for instance, or likes on a rune stick or something.
likes on the rune stick. So let's get into rituals. What rituals do we know of? Because this fascinates me. Like, what do we know of any that really existed that come from the time that we know they did?
So, I mean, as the one that I just described from Eric the Red saga, that is like the prime description of the Seder ritual. As I said before, or I was about to say, was that the Seder as such, the etymology of the word seems to have to do with strings. So there's like an element of like maybe like stringing the world together, or pulling strings from the world, or weaving is of course something that has also been brought up, like the idea that, going back to these goddesses, Frigg, for instance, weaving or spinning threads, the Norns spinning threads as well, as part of spinning threads of fate that are then like weaving into like the world fabric. That seems to have been at least an underlying idea in some of these stories. Sometimes it looks like that's what we encounter. The best version of this is Darradaljóð from which saga is that? Is that Njála? Damn, why am I blanking on that? It's probably Njála saga.
You know nothing.
I know nothing. So Darradaljóð means the spear song, and this is it is Njálssaga. I'm not a complete idiot. This is it's a scholarly poem where these I think it's like three women are sitting in a dinkja. That's like these half buried houses. And this guy, this is before the fateful battle in Ireland, which I'm also blanking on for some reason or other.
Yeah, you just embarrassing me now.
Yeah, no, now I need to go to bed. Huh?
It might be witchcraft.
Yes, it might be witchcraft. Somebody's like cursing me. Hopefully not. No, so this is before this fateful battle. Is it Malden? Maybe. Can't remember. Moving on. The point is that story that is like being told about these witches weaving this or whatever they are, Nortnir, perhaps, is that they are weaving the fates of the battle. They're using the entrails of humans. They're using heads as weights for the weave, and using spears and swords as well to keep them in place and so on. Like, so all the instruments for weaving are basically replaced with like human body parts and like weaponry. That's like a really heavy metal poem right there, like that's one of these examples of like the idea of like weaving fate, right? Because it's about what's going to happen in the battle the next day, and we see that in different contexts. There's something to that idea, and that's definitely tied in with the idea of like Seder and quote unquote witchcraft changing, because this magic is always about changing the reality. It's always about changing the outcome of something,
changing your own psyche in some kind of way.
Yeah,
and that's how I use my magic, and I actually, Varg and we actually incorporate it into our music as well. We're going to perform a ritual that he actually dreamt the other day, in order to get more connected with ourselves and in order to write the songs that we have within us.
Right.
So, yeah, that was kind of like an avsporing in Norwegian. I don't know the English word, but that was kind of just me babbling away.
I think it was quite on point, though. Like that, because what is happening, right, is that you guys, you're using your magic to create awesome things out in the world, right? So that is right there.
That's what we're trying to do, at least, because for me, this whole Viking Age thing, so to speak, it's not just some glorified hobby to me. It's the very essence of my being, so to speak. Yes, I'm all about glam and makeup and what have you not from the modern age, but at the same time, there is a soul within me that just shrieks and wants to reconnect with the collective consciousness that is within us, and wants to build a bridge between our cultural heritage and the modern day. And what a good way to do it through music, in my opinion. Because
absolutely,
it's with people through rhythms and through my voice and just through poetry of the old ways. Really,
music transcends time. It transcends religion, language, everything. I think there is something very innate about music. You know, you can listen to it and it just gives you certain feelings just from the music. It can energize you, it can depress you, it can evoke fierce, you know, the songs that I can listen to and it'll just bring a tear to my eye, not because it cannot be sad, and then within those 3-4 minutes of the song I can just be upset. Or if I'm working out and a particular song comes on, suddenly when I was absolutely knackered, I've got a little bit more energy. There is something that's extremely deep about music that can really attach to us and
heal
push us.
Pain, even in many situations. Oh, talk.
Hello. Your waiter brought you some water.
Yes, girl.
You've got him trained well.
Yes, yeah, that too.
Yeah, Jim made a good point in the comments just then. He said he couldn't imagine a life without music, which is a good point because I think even if you're not a big music listener, it's still everywhere, whether it's on adverts of things you're watching in the background when you go into a store. It is everywhere. It would be a weird world not to have it, and it's a strange idea to think that Vikings just didn't have it.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I would go as far as saying I don't think humans could imagine a life without music.
No,
it's just in general.
It feels like it's something that will have just been there since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
In some form or another. Like say, whether it's tapping your foot, anything. It's just one of those human qualities, I believe.
Absolutely, and I think it's a great way of processing things that have happened to you, or that you just want to make happen.
Mm-hmm.
Good. I want to ask about your rituals. If I don't know how, I know you said you like to keep some of them personal, but I want to kind of know what a normal ritual would be for you, or
a normal ritual,
or like what would it entail? Because it's a world that's so completely different to my own that it really interests me to kind of know a little bit more about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm more than open to talk about it. I mean, a normal ritual, I kind of have different layers of rituals. Some rituals are more like everyday, like, like putting small altars around the house, changing them up with the seasons. We have a lot of godlike small statues in our house. I would say that's a pretty simple, easy ritual to do. Because whenever you put intent into something, you can create some kind of energy around it. And that's what I've done with the interior of our home, because I'm very much into taxidermy and dead stuff in weird places, skeletons everywhere. And it can look kind of gory if you're not into it, but I find beauty in dead things. I'm sorry. That sounds really bad.
No, I think it depends on people's perspective on. Some people, I think, get quite sad about it and see death as something quite sad, whereas you can equally look at it on the other side and it's something that's beautiful and you're remembering,
or like honoring the animal.
That's how I would view it, is you're honoring the life, whereas I some people are on the other side and kind of see it as a almost disrespectful, I guess, but for me I don't think it is.
No, I don't think it is either, and they probably didn't think that in the Viking Age as well. And especially if you can use the whole animal, like the cow, for instance, you eat it, you drink from it, and you can walk on it when it's dead, because you make a rug out of the skin. So for me, it's more like honoring those kind of things, and taxidermy in itself is kind of like a dying art. So I buy a lot of secondhand taxidermy. But what I was speaking about is that the way I've decorated our home is in a way to make the energies flow through the rooms in a comfortable way. And I find that a lot of people who we invite into our home, they just don't want to leave. And I think that has a lot to do with the energy that we have created in our home. So that's kind of like an everyday ritual to cleanse the room, to use some kind of sage or burning röstling. I don't know the English word, but it's a common plant in Norway.
Sage seems like something that's used in so many different cultures.
Yes.
Like there must be something behind that, why it's used all over in different cultures as a cleanser. That must come from somewhere.
I think so too, and if you want like a Nordic equivalent to the sage, you can burn einetrær. I don't know the English word for that either, sadly, but there's some Nordic versions of it, and I think it, like you said, we find it in many different cultures. Strong smells tend to scare things off, I think, so maybe kind of an attempt to scare off bad spirits and just, get a fresh start.
And I imagine
that's
things.
the same with music, by the way. The music is also there to scare off bad spirits and tell them this is our space. Wrestling is a type of heather, and that's also one of the things that I like to use for like burning in rituals. But it's really hard to get around here, unfortunately. But sage grows in my backyard, so there's that.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, you should come visit. I can give you a bunch of it.
Wonderful.
I was about to say, I imagine things smelled really bad back then as well. So it would make sense to you would want to mask things. It's not like modern times.
I mean, they used.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, maybe your nose got used to bad smell, so you didn't really notice.
Oh yeah, definitely.
As I was just gonna say, like they used garlic to like improve their smell. So
yeah, I've smelled some people that must get used to it. So before we wrap up, I have to ask you about you on your Instagram. You have reincarnation, not reenactment. And that's really intrigued me, and I wanted to make sure we spoke about that.
Yeah, it says reincarnated, not reenacting. And it's, what do you want to
know? I want to know what it means. What do you mean by it?
What I mean by it? Basically, I'm not a reenactor. That's pretty clear, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the kind of critiques that has come back to me over and over again. But I've never claimed to be a reenactor. I have very much respect for reenactors, that has to be said, and for researchers and archaeologists. But personal to me, my interest for the Viking Age and my reason for doing my music and creating the clothes that I create has to do with my connection to the past, really, because I remember my past life from the Viking Age, or at least fragments of it, I believe, because it has come to me in visions and in dreams. So for me, my connection to the Viking Age is more about my soul just speaking to my past life, so to speak. Yeah.
I mean, there's some of your clothing that you make on your Instagram, and some of it is absolutely beautiful. You do a really good job. Are they all for you, or do you sell them on or gift them away?
Yeah, I'm currently working on making a lot of items for my online shop. So I've created all the items. I will sell them online on my blog. Mm-hmm. So I have a plan for that. I am a perfectionist. I just want things to be I want to stand for whatever I create. When I send it off into the world, I want it to be perfect, or nothing can be perfect. That's not possible, but
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, it can be draining, but at the same time it's good fun because I keep pushing myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to throw something in here. So, in one of the Eddic poems, this is the second poem of Helgi Hundingsbani. There's this is like this long epic about hero and tragic death in the end, all that stuff. Right. The important thing is what it says about their death. In the end, it says there was a belief in pagan times, which we now reckon as old wives' tales, because this is a Christian who's writing the poem, that people could be reincarnated. What? Helgi and Sigrun were thought to have been reborn. He was called Helgi Hattingja-Damager, and she was called Kaura, Halfdan's daughter, as is told in the song of Kaura, and she was a Valkyrie. So there you go. Basically,
I didn't know, actually. I thought that my belief in reincarnation had no root in kind of like the writings or anything like that.
Yeah, no, there's something to suggest this. There are two words that are being used. There's afturborin and endurborin. and I believe you can make a slight distinction between them. Like one is like basically it's hard to actually explain in English, but I think you would understand it from like in the Scandinavian context, like efter and gen, right? Genfødt as opposed to efterfødt. I think we can make that distinction in the Scandinavian languages still today, where one might be sort of like a reincarnation in a similar way that we know it from maybe like Hindu mythology and those Eastern traditions, and another one where it is the traits of the person that persist and like are reproduced through the line, the family line through centuries. It seems like there's been like these two conceptions present at some point in Scandinavia, at least.
Wow, that's really cool. I had no idea.
Well,
There we go.
But what Varg and I do is that we use the energies that we have built up from this life and past lives, because we have met each other in a different life, we believe. And we use this in our workings with the rituals and in our workings with the music.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of tie our past lives and our present life together in the workings with creating the new albums that we're working on. So it's going to be the new music that's coming up is going to be more ritualistic and maybe, just basically more ritualistic. And that allows me to use my vocals in a more traditional way as well. So, yeah.
That's exciting. When the new music comes out, you and Varg will have to come on together.
Oh, we would love to.
And we will talk about it.
Of course, yeah, we would love to, definitely.
No, this has been fun. I really enjoyed it. It's flown by. I think we're like an hour and a half. So yeah,
it went by so fast.
It is. It's definitely gone by quick. Thank you very much. If you got anything you want to shout out where people can listen to the music, people can follow you, people can buy your stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Just find me on Instagram or find me on a rune stick. I'm seriously speaking though. My Instagram is @the_Viking Queen. And there you can find links to our band Våluspá and also the other project Fædrespor.
Mm-hmm.
And I will keep you guys posted whenever I am going to sell my clothes online.
Yeah,
cool.
Absolutely. Like I say, one thing I would quickly just like to mention, when I was searching for you on Spotify earlier, it was a little difficult to find because you used the little accent on the O.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure people who do go and look find it, because I think there's another band with 2 A's at the end.
True that.
Yeah. So I clicked on that first. I was like, no, this isn't right. Mm-hmm. So I came across you, but I just wanted to clear it up for people so they went to the right place.
Okay, yeah. So if you want to find the right one on Instagram, either you can go to the Viking Queen and click in my bio and you will find that Instagram, or you can search for Våluspá band, like Våluspá, like the candle, the famous candle, the same writing, and then just band, Våluspá band. So yeah, I've used a difficult way of writing it on Spotify, but things aren't fun if they're easy, right?
No,
that's right.
Absolutely not. Like I say, it's not a criticism. I just wanted to make sure people found it if they were looking for it. I didn't want anybody else getting your listens.
I'm very glad you mentioned it. Thank you. I hope I cleared that up.
Matthias, where can everybody find you?
You can always find me on Instagram. My profile is just my name, Mathias Nordvik. And there I am, my ugly mug, showing up once in a while.
Don't talk about yourself like that. Talk about yourself with glory.
Okay, my glorious mug.
I think the first one was more accurate, but... you put some good nature pictures on there.
Yeah, sometimes.
It's always
I love nature. I do too on my Instagram sometimes.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna go through our stuff. Everyone's probably tuned off by this point, but if you enjoy the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review, particularly on iTunes. It really helps people find the show. Obviously, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at the Nordic Mythology Podcast. Same for the website, just the Nordic Mythology Podcast.com. You can pick up our t-shirts on there. And then if you want to support us even further, Patron's brilliant. You get an extra episode now a week where me and Mathias sit down and critique an episode from the Vikings TV show. We're working its way through the whole 9 or 7 series. We're doing the second episode right after this. So if you follow us on Patreon, it's
going to be like a lifetime pursuit, this thing.
Oh, it is. It is. It's going to be brilliant. So if you want to jump in on that, literally support us on any level on Patreon, from the £5 up to the £20 level, you get access to watch all the shows live. So you can sit in on the live chat with every episode we do, this and the watch long show as well. And I think that's about it. So yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you guys. I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to be back.
You will, absolutely. You just let me know when the music is coming out, and we'll tie it up with a release.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you guys.